It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, though, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day, listeners, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. It's episode 130. We've got a huge show ahead of us, so we'll get right on with it. Joining me again, as per usual, is Hong Kong Jack. G'day, mate. How are you?
I'm well.
Things in Hong Kong going well as you head into winter?
Yeah, we're having a nice autumn at the moment.
Excellent work. All right, big show, as I say, so let's get stuck in. We believe the Prime Minister is taking a week's leave at the moment, annual leave. Do they get the 4, Jack, the Prime Ministers? They get the 4 weeks. I never see them take the full 4, do you?
No.
But he is away at the moment, and that is in advance of his meeting with Trump in DC next week, Jack.
Yes.
And we are told that he is putting together a rare minerals deal for the United States, Jack, which should make Donald Trump very happy.
Yes, that seems a sensible thing to do.
And yes, there have been some skirmishes online between the US and China over China's, what would we call it, limited exports in rare metals. And this may be a good out for Donald Trump and also for Australia. And obviously there'll be discussions about AUKUS and nuclear submarines. We'll have to see how it goes.
Yes. Did I see some polling this morning that suggests that support for AUKUS is tanking?
Well, I think that's related to, I think there's a 10-point decline if it's the same poll I looked at in support for AUKUS. As opposed to the previous poll, I think a couple of months ago. And I think that has more to do with concerns about the Trump administration, Jack, among Australians.
Yeah, it probably does.
Yeah, so we'll see how...
And if a sensible government wouldn't take too much notice of it, a sensible government would just say, well, look, we've got to deal with the US that we have, and we will.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, polling like that can be a little bit unreliable in terms of national mood and what have you anyway. And it's essentially what question you ask. So if the question is sort of couched in the, do you like Donald Trump as a president of the United States, most Australians will say no. So I think it just reflects that. But rather than any sort of consideration of strategic partnerships between the US and the UK. All right, the big story breaking yesterday, Jack, was the super tax back down by the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers.
It was.
And are you across some of the detail, Jack? Would you like me to go through it for you?
No, you can go through it.
Well, there's a 40% tax rate for earnings on super balances above 10 million now. That replaces those who were with super balances with 3 million. Which will still be taxed at 30%. So that whole confusion about $3 million in super savings or more, not indexed, which was a major bugbear of the plan, is now going. And it would seem that there has been some intervention from the Prime Minister's office over this one. And Jim Chalmers has been rolled, Jack.
That's what it looks like. It's always hard to know unless you're actually inside, but it certainly looks like that.
Did you see him on 7:30? That's Jim Chalmers on 7:30 last night.
No, I missed that.
Look, it was a, shall I say, a tempered performance, given that he has been rolled. You know, it was a sort of head down, pragmatic sort of approach to things that he'd been rolled on this. There was quite a lot of alarm, and indeed some of the people, I guess not a lot of our listeners would be all that sympathetic to people with 3 million plus in super, but there were in fact people like farmers, etc., with their land holdings who had looked to sell them in anticipation of these things coming in July 1, 2026. The scheduled implementation will take a little bit longer now, and the government will make much of the fact that the other side of this is people with low superannuation balances, the low income tax offset for 1.3 million Australians will increase the low income tax offset from 37,000 to 45,000 and lift maximum payments from 500 to 810. Paul Keating was said to be a little bit annoyed about this policy, Jack, as it was, but he has since made a statement yesterday saying it was a huge policy achievement. That is the turnaround.
Yeah, as indeed Malcolm Turnbull has come out in support of it this morning.
Yes, I mean, there's a bit more detail to get through, but the simple fact of the matter is they weren't likely to get this through the Senate, and so even though they went to the people with it at the last election, there was no wiggle room in terms of getting it through the Senate, so they needed to amend it, and Jim Chalmers had to back down.
The real stinker in it was the taxation on unrealised capital gains.
I think the real stinker was the failure of indexation, because 3 million in super in 20 years' time is not going to be a substantial amount of money, and obviously it could be amended along the way, but that was the real stinker of it.
Yeah, but people are sort of okay with making people pay tax on something that they've actually got in their hand. It's very hard to persuade them that someone should be taxed on something that may exist on the screen, but they have never seen.
All right. Well, let's get back to personalities in politics. Is Chalmers somewhat isolated within the cabinet, Jack?
Treasurers and prime ministers win and lose these debates all the time, you know.
But it is true that
Paul Keating didn't win all his debates with Bob Hawke, I can tell you.
No, I know, but it is true, and I guess we're looking at a sort of similar relationship that Anthony Albanese is a lot closer to Katie Gallagher, Tony Burke, Mark Butler, Penny Wong, Don Farrell. They come across the sort of factional lines than he is with Jim Chalmers. There's not a close relationship there.
No, Chalmers is not a factional player of long standing in the way that Anthony Albanese is.
No, I think one of his. He's taken it. I think that was the Australian's headline. He's taken it on the chin, basically, Chalmers, and he
didn't have much choice, I don't think.
I don't think he did have much choice, but he's taken his licks, might be a better way of putting it, and. I actually think he's a significant contributor to the government, and his Queensland base is really critical for Labor's electoral success in many ways. So, because they don't have many from Queensland who are in the cabinet, certainly in the senior echelons of the government. But look, there's a back down there. The primary advice we could give people on this is get professional advice. No matter what your superannuation holdings are, you should get some professional advice. It's not our go, of course, to be offering that advice. We're neither of us licensed investor. What do you call it, Jack? Investment
financial advisors.
Advisors. There are quite a few people around who do offer advice who aren't, and they shouldn't. So we would just simply say that regardless of your superannuation holdings, and you should get some professional advice, particularly if you're in that sort of 10-year period before retirement.
Yeah, or you just give the money to us and we'll spend it.
We'll not spend it wisely, I'm fairly sure of that. Senator Thorpe wants to burn down the Parliament, Jack, which would be very, very difficult. There's a lot of concrete there. And some fairly heavy metals that need to get a real fire going. The AFP is said to be investigating, Jack, and this, of course, I'll just give you some context, came back to a speech that she uttered, I think, in Melbourne on Sunday, and she is no stranger to hyperbole, but she finds herself at the face of an AFP investigation. What will come of it, Jack?
I think she said this morning it was just a figure of speech.
She said that yesterday, yes, that it was a metaphor. She said she's not there to make friends in Parliament, Jack. She got that right. I don't think she's got too many. Pauline's not a friend. We know that. What will come of an AFP investigation? May I suggest precisely zero?
Yeah. I should think they'll make a bit of fuss and bother and nothing will happen.
Another censure, Jack. Another censure motion in the Senate. The government is mulling over how it responds to this. I suggest, as Tanya Plibersek offered yesterday, the proper answer is not to give it too much oxygen.
Well, she'll get it anyway because she's not bad at framing these things in a way that media organisations feel compelled to cover them.
There is a sense of timing about her hyperbole, Jack. The sort of look at me approach from Senator Lydia Thorpe. It's almost like she gets through about 3 or 4 months without making a headline, and she thinks, well, I better say something to draw the cameras my way. What would a censure motion, for our listeners, explain how a censure motion works and what it does?
Oh, I've forgotten what they do in the Senate. It's just a smack on the knuckles, really.
It's a series of speeches telling the senator what a bad person she is, and then a vote sort of confirms it, and then she can do pretty much what she wants, as we've explained to our listeners on numerous occasions. Whether it's Lydia Thorpe, whether it's Gareth Ward in the New South Wales Parliament, whether it's some of the ratbags in the Senate that are still there, like Ralph Babbitt, you can't get rid of them. I mean, it's almost impossible to get rid of them. And we saw that with Gareth Ward, although circumstances are somewhat different in the New South Wales State Parliament. That basically it all came down to Gareth Ward having to resign, even though he'd been convicted of very serious criminal offences.
Yeah, nor should the Senate be able to send duly elected people away. Really, going through a censure motion for parliamentarians, a bit like going to see the headmaster when you're a father and mother of the biggest donors at the school. You're going to hang your head in shame and look slightly remorseful, and life goes on.
I don't think Lydia Thorpe is capable of hanging her head in shame and being remorseful, Jack. If anything, she will just make a little bit more copy out of it. But moving on, yes, nothing really to be seen there, I wouldn't think, in terms of action from the AFP. And the narcissism rolls on, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, Australia has more respect for freedom of speech than perhaps the UK or the Europeans do at the moment.
Look, it clearly was a hyperbolic comment. It was a look at me comment as well. I want to make some noise. I want to make a headline. But beyond that, there's really no serious action that will be taken. Once they're elected, can't get rid of them. The only way you can do it is through the ballot box. And that's the way it should be, to be honest, yes. Mushroom murder. Patterson is back in the court, and there is an appeal against the length of her sentence, Jack. And one of the bases for the appeal is that she is looking at a long period of solitary confinement as an argument to reduce her non-parole period.
And will the judge use that as a basis for setting a non-parole period? And the DPP are arguing against that. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I see your pal Duncan McNabb's books on sale this
Duncan
morning.
McNabb's book's out. I gave it a little push
Recipes
today.
for Murder.
Hey?
Recipes for Murder.
Yeah, I did read an extract in the Australian. Duncan's a very fine writer, I think author of too many books to count here. I'm going to say about 20. Former New South Wales police officer as well, of high distinction, and basically one of the significant players in putting Rogerson away. And yes, it comes, the book, if you see it on your bookshelves, listeners, it comes with our stamp of approval.
Yep.
I have
Paperback,
just read an extract,
e-book.
but if you're into that story, I think I'm going to move along. I did watch the first part of a documentary, and that was enough for me, basically. I know this story is going to go on for 100 years, 200 years, maybe 300. But I'm a little bit over it. All right, big news, of course, around the world is the Gaza peace deal, Jack, and the hostage exchange, or hostage for prisoner exchange, occurred. 10 hostages, the 10 surviving hostages, Israeli hostages, have been returned amid great celebration in Israel. Over 1,000 prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, some of them convicted of terrible crimes, Jack, have been released. So we're into stage one. Where do we go to next?
This is all on the whiteboard being drawn up as we speak. It's get stage one fixed and then you move on to stage two.
Yeah,
this has been a shift. There's no doubt about it.
So what is stage two? Stage two is essentially the disarmament of Hamas.
Yes. Stage two will take some time. It's the disarmament of Hamas and some reform in the Palestinian Authority to put it on track, on some kind of pathway to be capable of running a Palestinian state, which it's not at the moment.
I want to keep going with stage two, but before I go, why is the Palestinian Authority, why does Israel want the Palestinian Authority excluded from this arrangement, Jack?
Well, for a number of reasons. I think President Abbas is in the 14th year of his first 4-year term. It's non-democratic. It doesn't have the support of the Palestinian people. That's why he hasn't gone back to an election. And it's corrupt. And it's not just corrupt. That's not not going to exclude you from running a state in the Middle East, but it's incapable.
I was just going to say
it's incapable of running anything bar a few blocks of Ramallah.
So what fills that vacuum, Jack? If Hamas is, we are making some speculative statements here. If Hamas is disarmed and essentially removed from, or have its authority removed, who negotiates on behalf of the Palestinians in Gaza?
No one negotiates on behalf of the Palestinians. The Palestinian territories will be run according to the plan by, I think they call it a technocratic group. This is the thing that will have Donald Trump as a titular head, but be run by Tony Blair, right? And that will have the support of Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, I think, and they will be providing the personnel.
Well, there's significant meeting of those parties occurring now in Egypt, Jack.
In Sharm
Firstly,
yes.
I would say that Alexander Downer came forward today in the Australian to say that it was a disgrace that Australia was not present. Is that the case?
No.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
If there's, this has been a huge triumph, getting the thing to this stage, and it's a reminder of the unimportance of the posturing of Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, Ursula von der Leyen, Anthony Albanese. None of these people were relevant in this deal at all, nor were the demonstrators marching up and down every Sunday in Melbourne and Sydney and London completely irrelevant. This deal.
No, what's significant is the support. As you've pointed out on a number of occasions, the support of the Arab world.
Yeah, we've been saying for 2 years the place to look and to watch is what the Arab and Muslim neighbours think about this, and they've been all brought on board, and that's what gives this a real prospect of peace. There's a number of reasons for that. Firstly, the Arab and Muslim neighbours will be much tougher on Hamas and insistent upon Hamas withdrawing than any Western country could be. And Hamas knows this. The Jordanians let most of the Palestine Liberation Organisation leave Jordan after the Black September war in Jordan, and they won't make that mistake again. And the Palestinians know that. That they won't be allowed to leave peacefully. They'll be, dealt with where they are. And there's a lot of history in this. And it's that group of nations that gives this a chance of success. And the major reason that they're all on board is because the US has shown its not just its capacity to project power. That bombing of Iran was hugely significant because nobody else in the world can project power quite like that. Right? Now, there is no other country that can do that. Not only could they do it, they showed they were willing to do it. There were no red lines drawn in the sand and later ignored. This was, we're not going to send heaps of troops over there to do something, but if we do something, we will do it. Right?
Well, let's talk about peacekeeping forces.
Yeah.
There have been a number of speculative contributions from nations within the Arab world, within the Muslim world, including Indonesia. I noticed recently...
That's hugely significant, by the way. That takes a lot of courage for an Indonesian president to turn up in Sharm el-Sheikh and possibly to go to Israel on this trip as well. It's an enormous amount of courage.
Well, I mean, I'll get back to some of the complexity and some of the issues that arise. I did notice that the recently sworn-in Shadow Minister for Home Affairs, Jono, well, we'll learn his name sooner or later, maybe we won't bother, but he suggested that Australian peacekeeping force may also contribute. The problem, Jack, is that does the peacekeeping force go in before disarmament of Hamas or afterwards? And these things are not yet known, and there's no time frame established for doing so. That is the disarmament of Hamas.
And from an American point of view, it rather depends upon what they can insist upon with the other countries, with the Arab and Muslim neighbours. Because it really depends what the Arab and Muslim neighbours are prepared to enforce with force.
Just further into that, Jack, we have Ahmet Siegel, Jack, who has offered his thoughts on the deal. He said there's no phase 2. That's clear to everyone, right? Phase 2 might happen someday, but it's unrelated to what's just been signed. The deal signed now is a hostage release deal. It doesn't imply anything about the future. Theoretically, fantasies could come true. Emiratis and allies dismantling tunnels and international bodies formed. Tony Blair governing Gaza. All this could happen in theory, but it's not part of the current tactical negotiation. So we have this stage 1, and then we have this very blurry stages 2 and 3, Jack.
Yeah, but I think it's wrong to say that stage 1 is nothing to do with stage 2. Stage 1's changed the strategic map, if you like, in the Middle East, and probably
well,
irrevocably.
I'm just going to quibble with you about it. I understand what you're saying, but this all could be transient. This all could be temporary.
That's always possible, but that seems unlikely to me. Because this is not the work of a weekend. That change in the strategic map of the Middle East goes back to the Abraham Accords. What's that now? 6 years ago, right? And the kind of falling out between the worsening relationship between Iran and the other countries in the Middle East. This is the map has changed. I mean, Hezbollah's no longer got much influence. Iran has very little indeed. Qatar, which was playing both sides of the fence, has had to choose a side and has.
And the rest of the Arab world is, I mean, look,
and
the rest of the Arab world is saying, we want peace in the Middle East.
Yeah, and they're also saying,
well, we want prosperity in the Middle East.
And that means there can be no role for Hamas. And countries like Pakistan are saying this, right? And the Indonesians are there.
Yeah, the Pakistanis are all on board.
Yeah.
The other issue, Jack, is that we've seen just in the last 24 hours that Hamas have been attacking a group within Palestine, I guess what we might call a sort of warlord type faction.
It's described as a clan, yes.
Yeah, clan. That's probably a better description rather than warlord faction. And a number of people killed in firefights between Hamas and this faction. It doesn't bode well, Jack.
Immediately there have been accusations that this is the pro-Israeli faction. I don't think that's true. It's certainly true that the Israelis have always been prepared to fund various of these clans in an attempt to destabilise parts of Palestine. So they'll give them a few guns.
So, but what struck me about that, Jack, is that there are still at least 1,000 armed members of Hamas in southern Gaza.
Yes.
I would say disarming them will be hugely difficult. Look,
but that also depends upon the people who can really bring that pressure are the Arab and Muslim neighbours who, and they are fed up with. I mean, Israel comes out of this war with a diminished international reputation. There's no doubt about that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's got very much fewer friends in the West. But so does Hamas.
They're almost friendless now, aren't they?
Yeah, they're almost friendless, right? It's hard to believe it was possible, but the Arab and Muslim neighbours and other countries dislike and distrust Hamas even more than they did 2 years ago. So that's the fulcrum of pressure that can be applied to them.
A couple more things, Jack. Why was this successful and other efforts have not been? And I'd add the rider. Why did this peace deal, ceasefire deal, 3-stage plan? Why did it take why didn't it happen 6 months ago?
I think these things take a little bit of time to happen for a number of reasons. One, you've got to create the preconditions that gives your partners or your potential partners a real interest in this solution. Things take time.
Perhaps as you say, sorry to interrupt, but as you say, perhaps the bombing of the Iranian nuclear facilities would have been
hugely important
step forward.
The decimation of Hezbollah with the pager attack, and the pager attack was important because it just shows how potent Mossad and the Israelis can be, how much they can get inside your own organisation. But even the bombing in Qatar, that showed the Qataris that even in their own country, they weren't safe.
pick a side and make sure you make the right choice.
Yeah, and when they were going to pick a side after that, because they knew that the Americans must have known about that because they flew very close to the American base, and you can't do that without telling the Americans beforehand. So they knew they had to pick a side. This was their chance. It was only going to be one choice. So all those things take a while to come together. And then Turkey now needs a few other things. It wants to get some F-35 planes, all that kind of stuff. So it's got an interest in keeping in good with America. So all of a sudden, over a period of time, their interests start to line up with what the American and the Israelis want. And then you've got a deal.
Well, why did Jared Kushner and Donald Trump succeed while perhaps the Biden administration did not, Jack?
I wouldn't single out the Biden administration. This would go back 30 years of State Department conventional wisdom, and it's been wrong.
All right.
And the other thing is the State Department approach is all very learned and sophisticated. And I was reading yesterday from a bloke who did the foreign relations course at Georgetown University in DC, and that's basically taught by the boffins from Foggy Bottom, the State Department people, right? And he said they were incredibly sophisticated, had so much academic knowledge, and he said, and I've learned over the last couple of years that everything they taught me was wrong.
Fair enough. Okay, moving on. Donald Trump deserves significant credit, Jack, for at least getting it to this point. I would argue that perhaps it should have been done a little earlier. And we do have, the next stage, the next immediate stage, in stage one, is humanitarian aid into Palestine, where we've got a significant number of people, children in particular, suffering from malnutrition. That needs to be dealt with sooner rather than later, obviously. And I noticed that all the accepted aid groups will be enrolled. I mean, there was an utter failure when Israel tried to do it on its own, and not least of all because when you start getting humanitarian aid into a place that's a sort of nest of vipers with Hamas around, they're going to hijack, they're going to steal, people are going to be, they're going to be shootings over this. But once you start rolling the aid in significant amounts, things should start working there fairly quickly. We'll get to Trump and the Nobel Prize in a minute, but just firstly, given that this humanitarian rollout will occur, and people with malnutrition, it's a very obvious thing to say, but people with, particularly children suffering malnutrition, you can't just sit them down and have a chicken dinner. They will need to be nursed along for a significant period of time. They will need to have their needs met over a significant period of time. What about this? What do the protesters do, Jack, around the world? You mentioned Sydney and Melbourne every Sunday. Significant numbers in the UK and elsewhere in Europe. What do they have to protest about, Jack?
Well, they're at the moment carrying on like it's business as usual. And I think part of the reason for that is that they didn't really care all that much about Palestinian people. What this is a protest against Western civilization. Israel happens to be on the front line of Western civilization.
Well, it gets them out in the fresh air, Jack, on a Sunday.
Yeah, that's right.
I would argue that it becomes more or less a habit. This kind of activism becomes a sort of habit. You've met all your friends there. You've met a whole bunch of people that you've never met before.
Romances start there.
It's going to be a sad time when these rallies start wrapping up. It'll be very, very interesting to see how those numbers go in future around the world, and particularly in Sydney and Melbourne. But for mine, they seem to be clutching on to a protest movement that is largely lacking relevancy, and more so when this humanitarian aid really starts to roll out in a significant way.
To be fair, Jack, this is fun. That's why you have groups.
It's a bit of fun.
That's why you have groups like Queers for Palestine. They're not serious people. They're out there spending a pleasant Sunday afternoon.
Weather's good, spring in Australia, beautiful.
Yeah. And
have a day out.
And
have a sausage sizzle.
And it's historically inevitable that people, that young people of that age will have stupid ideas. God knows, I certainly did. Right?
All right, now Nobel Peace Prize time, Jack.
Did you? I actually tried manfully to listen to the lap of honour President Trump did yesterday, but
it's hard work, mate.
I lasted 5 minutes. It was broadcast on the ABC Asia Network, and I find it impossible to listen to those things.
I did hear him say, because this is the seventh war that he stopped, of course.
Yes, was it seven or 8?
He wanted 7 Nobel Peace Prizes.
Yeah, was it 7 or 8? I can't remember. Anyway,
I could only ever count to 4. He mentioned the Ethiopian-Egyptian conflict, which is over a damming of the Nile by the Ethiopians that's made the Egyptians a little antsy, and there are no shots being fired there. And with Trump's intervention, there are no shots being fired there. The other one he got a little bit confused about was Azerbaijan and Armenia, which he described as Azerbaijan and Albania. Pakistan and India, well, there was an exchange of artillery.
The Indians are not very pleased with this.
It's not as if that stopped. It's not as if Pakistanis and the Indian troops have embraced all singing Kumbaya across the disputed border in Srinagar.
What's it called? The line of resistance, whatever it's called up there in Kashmir.
So that was 3. There was Rwanda and the DRC. Well, we'll see how that goes. And I couldn't get any more. But anyway, am I quibbling? Jack?
So he's very poor at that sort of stuff. He's like a classical musician trying to play country and western when he does a lap of honour. He's just not suited to the thing.
The Australian is reporting. Sorry to interrupt again. The Egypt summit is underway, and the true purpose of the Egypt summit, and I'm quoting from the Australian, was to keep Donald Trump engaged amid concerns his attention will wander when plaudits give way to the tougher realities of peacemaking.
It could be.
I suggest that's a fairly significant potential problem.
What you have to accept, though, that what happened yesterday in Israel, his appearance yesterday in Israel, and the whole setup at Sharm el-Sheikh just down the road in the Sinai, was an absolute triumph of the projection of American power.
Fair point.
He's an absolute master of getting the visuals of that sort of stuff right. It was a wonderful moment when he says, "Oh, it's the UK here, the UK," and Keir Starmer trots up, hopefully looking like he's going to get a chance to say something, and Trump shakes his hand and dismisses him back into the line. Right? He is. You look at that stage, you watch that. He is the giant. The rest of them are pygmies. Really,
Well, everyone seems to be, kneeling before him. This is the thing. Whether it's the Qataris flicking him a plane, the rest of the world is beyond flattering Trump. They're essentially giving him what he needs, or what he wants, I should say, not what he needs. But to the Nobel Peace Prize, Jack, of course, it was awarded to the Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. A good announcement, Jack?
I don't know enough about her, really, to be sure. She certainly won't be the worst Nobel Peace Prize recipient.
No, there have been some shockers.
Yes.
Henry Kissinger?
Yes, he sort of comes to mind. But
bombing Cambodia when he won it? Oh, a little bit after the bombing, secret bombing of Cambodia.
I don't think Barack Obama had actually unpacked the boxes in the White House before they gave him one.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of reason. I'm not entirely sure why he won that. Do you remember?
Well, he'd only been in the White House for a few months, so really it's hard to.
I remember that. Yeah. I just don't know what the actual reason for it
I think
was.
we can be pretty confident that Donald Trump won't get a Nobel Peace Prize, and to be honest, given the list of previous recipients, why would you want one?
Yeah, well, look, just in regard to the Venezuelan opposition leader Machado, I did see a rather lovely call that came through from the Nobel Peace Prize committee to her, and the fellow there announced who he was and that she had been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and she was just basically, she couldn't believe it, and it was a rather lovely thing. So I think yes, she is. Everything I read about her is good. I mean, you do have a significant problem with a illegitimate regime in Venezuela right now.
Yeah, I think they've announced this morning that they're going to withdraw their embassy from Oslo, the Venezuelans.
Yeah, well, that'll hurt.
Yes, I that's what I was thinking. Ouch!
We must move on, but at some point in the near future, we must look at Venezuela and just how the Trump administration is dealing with that. I don't think we're in the regime change business just yet. But obviously there have been attacks on Venezuelan craft, seagoing craft. Some people say they were fishermen. Other people say they were drug traffickers. Yeah. But that's about as bad as it's got. But clearly the Venezuelan regime will be looking over its shoulder, Jack.
Having seen some video of that, the fishing boat thing's a little bit unconvincing. They looked a lot like speedboats to me.
But yes, I mean, there doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence of drug trafficking either. I mean, Venezuela is not one of like the Peruvians and the Colombians. They are not actively, not to the same degree involved in delivering cocaine to a substantial market in the United States of America and North America generally. Maybe that's the problem. The demand is the problem, not the supply. Anyway, we must move on to soybeans, Jack. I don't eat soy as it's not just as a rule. I just refuse to eat it. And if anyone ever delivers it on the plate, if you were like straight on the side.
If you were like me, the Greta Thunberg of Hong Kong, caring about the environment, you would eat your tofu.
Well, there's a large amount of agricultural activity, of course. And as some of our listeners may know, there has been historically $12 billion, or it was last year, $12 billion in exports from the United States in soybeans to China. Now, that's all gone. I mean, the amount of US exports to China of soybean is now at zero, with China having gone to the Brazilians and the Argentinians to basically confirm their supply. And this is a serious problem for US farmers.
Yeah, and it suits the Brazilians and Argentinians because they're big on broad-scale cropping, which is what you need, right, to make a go of this.
Yeah, and look, it must be, if you were a US soybean farmer, Jack, you must be looking askance at a US $20 billion bailout received by Argentina at the same time. So not only are you losing your income, but your tax dollars are going to an administration that is supplying the soybeans to China, taking up your market and then taxing you for it.
Do you think this is related to Trump's talking up the idea of having some kind of a farm bailout in the US, which is a terrible idea. The idea that you ruin the trade and then have a bailout is awful economics. But do you think those two things might be related?
Well, what I do know is that I'm seeing a lot of very angry farmers in the Midwest, not just soybean farmers, that are looking at it. Look, it's reminiscent of the old farm aid days in the 80s, Jack.
Yes.
When the
US
Bob
Dylan going to do a show?
Agricultural industry was really on its knees, and it's very, very similar to that now. You do have, and maybe some people will say, well, maybe you shouldn't have voted for the guy, but that's what's happening.
Could make it very hard for JD Vance in a few years' time.
Yeah,
do you
one
think,
of those things to watch.
Do you think Willie Nelson and Bob Dylan are still up to doing a show?
Well, he's in his 90s now, so he might be struggling. We might have to get old John Cougar Mellencamp out, Jack.
Oh, okay.
Roll him out again.
No, I think he's just John Mellencamp now, isn't he? Or was he going back to the Cougar thing?
Yes, look, I think you may be right on that. It comes back to a magnificent line from the Office when the large human being who worked in accounts there said, if you ever get offered 10,000 to 1, you take the bet. He goes, John Cougar Mellencamp ever wins an Oscar, I'll be sitting pretty. 12 billion in exports, all gone. Meantime, the Argentinian economy has been bolstered with a $20 billion bailout. Now, this is going to be very, very interesting to watch, Jack, and we will report on it, perhaps not next week, but the week after. Javier Milei, of course, is the libertarian president of Argentina. He has midterms later this month on the 26th of October. And there were provincial elections in Buenos Aires several weeks ago where his party received an absolute belting. So it'll be very interesting to see how the midterms go in Argentina a couple of weeks' time. The inflation rate is at 33.6. Now, that's down from its highs 3 years ago when it was truly into three figures. But debt to GDP is at 83%. And the lowest it has ever been, in recent history, is 33.9 in 2012, and the highest 113%. That's debt to GDP ratio, the highest at 113 in 2003. So things are not looking good there, and the experiment is looking like it will fail, Jack. But we'll see. Just to let our listeners know, we'll see what goes on in those midterm elections, but the signs are that Milei's party will be belted and lose any sort of majority it has in the Argentinian legislature. All right, moving on to lawfare, which is a cobbled together term, a portmanteau, Jack. Maybe not a portmanteau, but we'll move on from that. Of course, we've got James Comey before the courts, charged with lying to the Congress and I think obstruction as well.
Yeah, both.
The former head of the FBI, the former director of the FBI, and now we have, more recently, we have the New York State Attorney General, Letitia James. And she was indicted on Thursday by a federal grand jury in Virginia on charges of bank fraud and making false claims to a financial institution that netted her nearly $19,000 in savings on a loan for a second home. Gee, that looks a bit shaky, doesn't it, Jack? I mean, quid pro quo, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting that the first two former officials, for federal officials, they've had a crack at seem to be James Comey and John Bolton's being investigated.
Has he been indicted yet? Because it's only a matter of time.
He's before a grand jury at the moment.
Right.
And I thought they were interesting first choices for this reason, is that Comey managed to piss off both the Trumps and the Clintons, and you'd wonder how much support there would be for defending him, right? Okay, so he's a nice, easy target. And John Bolton's pretty much the same. John Bolton's irritated the Democrats, for years and years.
He's always been a GOP hawk, yeah.
Yeah, and he's also managed to piss off the MAGA people and indeed even the establishment Republicans, the few of them that are left.
But Jack, that's got very little to do with justice.
Yeah, so he's almost friendless. So they're two nice, easy targets to make a point. It depends how much further it goes. I don't like it for this reason. This was a mistake when it was done to Trump. You don't investigate a person, you investigate crimes. And once you start investigating people, you're going down a very, very bad track. And politically, it's generally a losing move. It was with Trump. Trump was just about finished.
Excuse me. I do note that Patrick Fitzgerald is representing Comey. He is a United States Attorney.
He's the former attorney,
Special Counsel for the United States Department of Justice, a heavy hitter, Jack. And can we look at counsel for the prosecution, Jack, or for the DOJ? And I've just got a little profile here. Just give me one moment. This is U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, Jack, and she basically acted on behalf of insurance companies in litigated matters against residential and commercial property claims. Because I'm told no one else within the DOJ, as it stands, would take on the case.
Wanted to take the case. And choice of counsel can be important. One looks back to the Georgia case and what was her name? Fannie Lewis and her.
Yeah, that was a disaster.
Yeah. This can go.
Well, certainly the Comey case and the Letitia James, and of course, just for our listeners' benefit, Letitia James was the one who successfully prosecuted Donald Trump.
She's the New York attorney.
Yeah, that's right. And both cases, it's understood, will be defended as malicious prosecution, Jack. We shall see. Very, very quickly, Jack, because we need to move on. Dominion voting systems, that much maligned company providing in certain states, not all states in the United States, a electronic, if you like, voting platform, has been acquired by the founder and chairman of Liberty Vote, which is a right-wing organisation, Scott Linedecker, in a deal which included dropping lawsuits against conservatives. Very, very strange, all of this, Jack.
It is. I was chuckling to myself. I was reading this. It's one of those situations where it looks like he's bought it to shut it down. And I've got no truck with Liberty Voting or whatever they are, but I'm a paper ballot man.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree, and certainly on the paper stuff, it just seems very, very odd. I do see the mention of One American News Network. I thought they had come to a settlement there.
They have with some people, but there was still some outstanding stuff against Rudy Giuliani, amongst others as well.
Mike Lindell, I think, is another one. The old crack pipe smoking My Pillow guy.
Oh, yes, yep.
And I think he was in the gun, but I don't know that they've actually got around the business of claiming or taking any money off him. So that is a very interesting one. Circumcision, Jack. Now, male circumcision is a bit of a hot topic in the last few days.
Yeah, well, I found this and I said, who had this in their multis, right? And that circumcision was going to be in the news, right?
With Bobby Kennedy Jr., Jack.
You never know, do you?
The bingo card goes out the door.
Yeah.
So he said there are 2 studies that show children who are circumcised, and I think he means boys, early have double the rate of autism. And then he went on to say it's highly likely because they are given Tylenol. Now, we did discuss this on the conditional release program's Black Label. And as usual, RFK is making up a fair bit of stuff, Jack. Can I just give you a bit of information about that? What he was talking about is a Danish study on ritual circumcision released in 2015. It was a study that acknowledged a number of shortcomings. It was very sort of honest, as good scientific studies should be. Now, it acknowledged a number of shortcomings that they could only look at circumcision, male circumcision, that was performed in a hospital or a clinic. It could not do so around, let's say, a ritual circumcision outside of a hospital setting. They acknowledged that in their study. But here's the bit, because we just want to remind our listeners what Bobby Kennedy Jr. said. It's highly likely because they are given Tylenol. Now, the Danish study specifically said that it did not collect data in relation to analgesics or local anesthesia. So there was no data. So, and then he refers to a second study, which essentially was an op-ed based on the first, not a study. So he's just making stuff up, Jack.
And in any event, as I understand it, in the United States, certainly the standard procedure is to offer one dose of Tylenol 6 hours after the event. I wish you hadn't said there's this little bit there at that stage.
But the Danish study could draw no conclusions about Tylenol because it didn't collect the data. And it acknowledges that in the study. So what is he talking about? Now, Joel puts together some stuff to suggest that as a litigator, Tylenol, or the makers of Tylenol, used to be Johnson & Johnson, can't think of the name of the company that does it now, are sort of under attack from a number of Kennedy allies. And it may well be that old Bobby Jr. has shown his hat in the ring there to support this sort of significant action against Tylenol. It's Panadol, guys. It's not dangerous. Yeah.
And even if he's got some data, correlation and causation are not the same thing.
He doesn't have data. That's the thing. That's what the thing. I mean, this is the problem we've got, Jack. He just makes stuff up. And whether he's got some sort of relationship that, it's a corrupt relationship that pushes him in this direction, or whether he just has no ability to read scientific data, either way, it's pretty bloody terrifying.
Gee, corruption, eh? And him being a Kennedy, really.
I think he's the worst of them, Jack. Let's not forget that as an assistant district attorney in the Southern District of New York, Jack, which is certainly a job that he didn't get on the basis of his law degree.
You don't think he applied as Bob Smith then?
Yeah, well, I don't think Mr. Smith would have got the Guernsey. But while he was there, Jack, he was committing drug offences, including supply heroin, on a daily basis. So that tells you a fair bit about him. All right, very quickly, we've got to move on, Jack. The Tory conference has the Tory leader, Badenoch, the Nigerian-born woman, has she done enough to drag the Tories back into the fight?
No, I don't think she has. The crowds were very small. I sort of watched a little bit of this, but she did a good job. She had less trouble getting through the week than, say, Keir Starmer had at the Labor conference. But
she's very capable.
Yeah,
she is very capable.
She's. They'd have done better if they'd chosen her a couple of choices ago.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. What, 4 Tory leaders ago?
4 or 5. Yeah. Oh, there was a nice table on Twitter late last night that was ranking all the recent prime ministers of the UK with a poll of, and broken down into Labor, Tory, Lib Dems, etc. Right? Going back to the Thatcher days, Thatcher wins this with 29% of the vote. Tony Blair gets 12%. This is as best prime minister. Tony Blair gets 12% of the vote, and everybody else is below that. But I was most amused that Boris Johnson topped Starmer, Sunak, May, his old Eton and Oxford pal Cameron, and John Major, and that just made me laugh, I've got to say.
Well, there's hope. There's hope for book sales for the Johnson biography, after all, the Johnson memoirs, after all.
Oh, that'll sell because he's a very entertaining writer.
He's a very entertaining man, Jake. I just don't think he's a terribly good politician. But anyway,
did you see that stunt he pulled with? What's her name from the ABC? Was interviewing him at one of the literary festivals. What's her name? She's Lee Sales' partner on that show.
Oh yes, keep going.
And she's interviewing, and he asks her a question that he doesn't want to answer. So he tells her a little story about when he was on a kind of a gap year in Australia. He reckoned he was up in the Northern Territory and up a tree with a crocodile chasing him. And all I could think to do was to start to recite the Iliad, right? So
Oh, I
he
thought I was
does.
going to say Jerusalem.
So he does this in the ancient Greek in front of 500 people at a literary festival in Australia. And it goes on and on and on. Every time she thinks he's going to stop, he takes a big, deep breath and goes on to the next verse. And the crowd are rolling around the floor laughing. None of them understood a word he was saying, really. He could have been talking complete gibberish. But he is entertaining. Not a great Prime Minister, but entertaining.
Yes, indeed. Now, Neil Kinnock, a former Labor leader, Jack, has said that if the Tory party dies, the Labor Party, with a U in the UK, dies too. I'm not sure that I agree with that.
Yeah, no, I saw this interview and no, I kind of thought Neil Kinnock spent too much time in Brussels and has kind of lost the plot. But he has a point. There needs to be, and there's a lesson in it for Australia, we need a kind of a competent centre-right government. So if the Liberals and National Party coalition does fall over, something will replace it. We'd just be better off if it was competent.
It doesn't make either centre-right parties extinct. It just changes the game, is what I would argue about there. Meanwhile, Jack, in Moscow, Syria's former President Bashar al-Assad is sitting around in his luxury high-rise in Moscow playing video games, Jack.
And I've got to say, the high-rise is an error, Bashir. Get yourself a ground floor flat.
The story goes on, Jack, that in this luxury high-rise in Moscow, he appears to enjoy stunning views of Moscow from his apartment. And I'd say, just as a word of advice to Bashar al-Assad, don't look out the window too long.
Buy a postcard. Look at the postcards instead.
Meanwhile, in Italy, Jack, Italy's ruling party, the Brothers of Italy, FDL, has announced plans to draft a bill aimed at banning face and body coverings, such as the burqa and niqab, in all public spaces across the country, describing it as a measure against Islamic separatism. There's a quote here I'll quickly go through. Freedom of religion is sacred, but it must be practiced openly with full respect for our constitution and the principles of the Italian state. That was Andrea Del Mastro, who assisted drafting the bill. What do we make of it, Jack? We're talking about fines around about €300 to €3,000 for putting on the burqa or niqab.
I think it's not a bad idea to have some assertion of a cultural Italianism, if you like. But we do know the French have been doing this for 15 years, without any notable success.
No, and it's one of those things that it's law for its own sake, and people can wear whatever they want to wear in public, surely. Otherwise, well, the Vatican State is an independent state, but we might be locking up the Pope for wearing a silly hat, Jack.
The answer is not in banning things. The answer is supporting the majority culture, making that strong. Now, where it's strong, like it is in Australia and in the United States, second generation migrants, by and large, want to be American and want to be Australian. So, you and I grew up with the post-war migrant kids sitting in the same class as me, and they might have started out as little Italian and Greek kids, but they ended up as Aussie as you and I, and that's how it works.
Well, indeed, it's basically, I think, a process of assimilation that doesn't really require any legal intervention.
No.
Meanwhile, in France...
But it does require you to be quite unembarrassed about saying it's good to be Australian, right? And it's good to be American. That's what it requires.
The law really has no place in these sorts of things. I've argued about this on numerous occasions. I think it has occasionally in the Australian political context. Got to mention, you might remember Pauline wearing the hijab, was it Naqib, whatever it is, the burqa, into the Senate, Jack. You remember that? And then all of a sudden there was theatrical reveal. Just stupid. Anyway, in France, the political chaos continues. President Emmanuel Macron has asked Sébastien Lecornu to return as French Prime Minister only 4 days after he stood down from the post, sparking a week of high drama and political turmoil, which I gather is just excellent theatre for the French population, who must be having a good laugh while rolling their eyes a bit too.
A lovely cartoon in one of the British papers this week of a semi-inflatable arriving on the under the cliffs of Dover with a bunch of chaps in it saying, "We're all French MPs and we want to come over here so we can avoid being made president."
If you go over to Paris, you might stand a chance, Jack. Here's a nice piece.
My French is not as good as yours, so I think that would be a handicap.
Well, I'd be a chance. I would just sit. I would just have to sit there. I can speak a little bit of French, but I'm not very good at listening to it or understanding when it is spoken. So I could be a perfect prime minister. I'd just nod meaningfully while people were talking to me.
Oh, come on! That would kill you if you had to sit there and listen and not say anything.
Well, I don't know. I'd have to assume another persona, no doubt. Nice little story. That young people are falling in love with old technology. This is a story from the Wall Street Journal. When it cites the example of one American teenager, Lucy Jackson, who used a phone that can do little besides make a phone call. And with a little bit of effort, if you remember the old days of the old Nokias, send a text. And she's a college freshman. So what's going on there, Jack? Is it just a sort of cloying nostalgia?
Probably. I mean, I do see. I have seen in the last 6 to 12 months people with digital cameras again, right? Not just using their phone. People taking, the little small digital cameras.
Highly regarded or wannabe photographers will go to cameras that aren't their phones, although
but there's always been people with the proper SLRs, the digital SLRs, all that kind of stuff, right? But just that little digital camera that people used to carry around, the one that's about as big as a cigarette pack, they're making a little bit of a comeback here amongst the visitors from the mainland and Korea and those sort of places. They're very stylish young people, so it's them who are onto it.
Yeah, I somehow think we are dealing with a bit of a whimsical story here, Jack.
It probably is.
The iPhone 17 is out, which apparently delivers all the photographics one would ever need, and it has been a bit of a shortcoming of Apple phones with Samsung and the Google phones offering a little bit better in terms of photography. It's important now because if you are social media posting, having photos that you can upload straight from your phone is a big thing if you've got one of those big followings on social media.
Yeah, I think I was the last remaining Nokia user in Hong Kong before mine died, unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd probably still be using it.
Well, for my wife's mother, she did have an iPhone, and it basically just collapsed from misuse. Years of misuse, and I dispatched my my youngest daughter over there, who's quite technically proficient, to see what could be done. But apparently, the phone could not be unlocked, even with the code. So we ended up buying her a very, very stock standard, like a Nokia type phone, so she could make calls and make and receive calls. But I just noticed my wife leaving because, again, her mother is not picking up the phone. so you can lead a horse to water, Jack. All right. Well, look, I do have one recommendation here, and I watched this documentary last night.
On Candy.
Yeah, so look, I'm talking about the John Candy documentary called I Like Me, which is a line, of course, from Planes, Trains and Automobiles. It's a wonderful documentary and a host of stars that all were known pretty well to to Candy, worked with him with Toronto's Second City TV. That includes Dan Aykroyd, Catherine O'Hara, Eugene Levy, Harold Ramis, who appears in file footage, the late Harold Ramis, and Martin Short, of course, and others that appear there, Bill Murray, Steve Martin, and Dick Cavett. Host of stars, and of course Candy's wife and son and daughter. It's directed by Tom Hanks, who is Colin Hanks. Sorry, directed by Colin Hanks, who is Tom Hanks' son. And it all starts, when you'll laugh and you'll cry. I do strongly recommend this to our listeners. It's on Amazon Prime and starts with a bit of smart arsery from Bill Murray. He also says, look, whenever I think of John Candy, I'll try not to cry, and then moves to a very, very powerful eulogy by Dan Aykroyd at John Candy's funeral, who died in 1994. There's a review of this film. There's a number of them. It's highly rated on Rotten Tomatoes and elsewhere. But I did like this review because it gets to the heart of John Candy and his tragic death. It says, for the most part, this is a movie about a man who was talented, funny and famous, and also generous, beloved and loving, and who believed you could be all of those things at the same time without internal conflict. And Conan O'Brien addresses that, as does Murray, but Conan O'Brien addresses that as saying, this industry, the movie industry that Candy was in, he said, giving people like John Candy will just be consumed, will be devoured by people who want something and just keep demanding and never give back. And that sort of is reflected in the latter part of his life. And he was, I was a huge fan of John Candy. He's always an extremely funny guy. And this is what Mel Brooks said about him. He said he bought himself to every movie he was in. There was a bit of John Candy there, as well as the character that he was playing. Wonderful documentary. I Like Me, the John Candy documentary, biography, if you like, on Amazon Prime. Highly recommended, Jack.
While we're on the obit section, Anne Bancroft. Anne Bancroft. What's her name?
Who you killed
Keaton.
off now? Oh,
Diane Keaton.
Diane Keaton, yes, of course, a wonderful actress, and I think Woody Allen paid tribute to her yesterday, describing her as basically a one-off, and that seems to be the general opinion. Of course, the star of Godfathers 1, 2, and the unfortunate Godfather 3, and probably Godfather 1 was probably her breakout film. I worked a lot with Woody Allen. I worked a fair bit with Steve Martin as well in the Father of the Bride series, and much beloved by moviegoers and the people within the industry as well. Sport, Jack. The Women's ODI World Cup is underway. Australia on top of the table after Australia chased down 330 made by India, with Alyssa Healy making her first ton in more than 3 years. She got 142. Phoebe Litchfield got 40, putting on 85 with Healy for the opening stand, and by the 10th over, by the way, so they were really having a good lash at it. Ashley Gardner, the wonderful cricketer she is, she got 42. And Elise Perry, I think she retired on about 30 with muscular cramps and returned to the crease to belt the winning run. She got 47 not out. India were 280 at the 40th over mark, and so to keep them down to 330 in that final 10 overs was something of an achievement from the bowlers and the Australian bowlers and fielding side. Smriti Madana is India's clearly best bat. She got 80 odd. Would have liked to have gone on. But the thing is, Jack, the Australian women's cricket team, I'd make a very strong argument that they are the best sporting team anywhere in the world. And it would be very difficult to challenge just on their success rate and their win rates. And it's like there aren't too many more records for them to break, except this is the largest run chase in women's cricket history, beating the previous best by almost 30 runs, Jack. And as we go on to the tournament, Australia's got 3 games to play. They'll play Bangladesh next. They're on top of the table, as I said before, and England are second, South Africa third, and India fourth. And that looks pretty much settled with 3 or 4 games to go for each of the participating sides. So Australia well on track there in India to come home with some more silverware, Jack. Now, the trade week. You reckon it gets more coverage than the grand final? I'd say it is gossipers' news more often than not.
It is, but it seems to it must pay for itself because every man and his dog in Melbourne's run a TV show or a radio show about it.
I know, and you've got to say football journalists as well as football people, club people. When do they get time off now? get about 3 or 4 weeks over Christmas now. Your coaches and your senior players, officials, and player managers, and so forth.
And they all go to the Sorrento Hotel and get full of ink and make a goose of themselves.
It does occasionally happen. I did note that Will Hayward, who has been mooted in trade for Charlie Curnow at Sydney Swans, he's in Brazil at the moment, Jack.
Okay, all right.
And so there's a lot of gossip and rumour that goes on. It's the final week. I think it closes Friday. Friday might be Friday or Thursday. It sort of close the business then. All the trading must be done by that stage. It's very odd the way things are at the moment. I do note North Melbourne. Darren Crocker there, former North Melbourne champion. I think he's the coach of the women's side. We'll get to them in a minute. And also plays a significant role around the footy fair for the men. And he's saying that sides like Essendon and North Melbourne, they just can't even get into the trade period because no one wants to play with them, which is a significant problem. The other problem I see they've got, the Essendon captain, for example, so there is some trading going on there, but he wants to go to Hawthorn. He's got how many years left on his contract?
2 or 3, I think, and but he had to go to the best and fairest because he was going to win it, and which he did.
Yeah.
That's his 6th best and fairest win. He's easily their best player.
Yeah,
but he wants out, and he's 29 or 30, so he might have 5 or 6 years left in him, but that's probably it. What do you do? I mean, the contracts don't seem to be worth anything these days, do they? I mean, I've got a contract. Well, who cares?
Yeah, well,
I want to go, right?
I'll get to the others in a minute. But who's the big bloke at Essendon? He's been traded to Brisbane Lions.
Yeah, Sam Draper.
Sam Draper. That is a very good pickup for Brisbane. I mean, I think he's.
What the top clubs have turned into an art form is to say, we think this bloke's underperforming a bit, maybe through injury, maybe through lack of interest, maybe he's fallen out with the club, and we'll back ourselves to make him better. So Brisbane did it with Joey Danaher, who was just about on his uppers at Essendon before he left. Couldn't hardly get on the park. He was always injured, and they made him better. I mean, the Swans did this years ago with Barry Hall, who was just a nutcase at St Kilda, right? And they made him a proper player. Right? So the top level clubs, that's their secret sauce, is to take a bloke who they think's talented and give him a chance and get him to play to his potential. And that's why the lower level clubs find it hard to attract people, because they've got to be able to prove that they can do that, right?
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of football socialism, Jack, you're going to end up with Geelong, Hawthorn, Hawthorn, Brisbane Lions dominating the competition the way things are going. Because what you are seeing with guys who are in in their 6th year of tenure, it makes them free agents, restricted free agents. It happened with Tom DeConnick at Carlton, or indeed after 10-year service, unrestricted free agency, is that they want to go and play with sides they believe will make the finals. Now, you can't blame the players for doing that, and their compensation draft picks and all that sort of stuff, but that's all not much by way of compensation. Because the big one is Charlie Curnow. It looked like that was not going to go ahead. And when we talk about the coverage of this, I think Matthew Lloyd was saying, I don't think a deal will get done. I think he'll be a Carlton next year. That was earlier last week. And now, of course, Sydney are putting together a bit of a package which would involve Will Hayward and Ollie Florent and a couple of first-round draft picks, something of that order. I don't know that it's enough, to be honest, but once a player wants to go, there hardly seems much point in keeping them.
Yeah, and also some players are kind of open to be shifted. I'm not sure what Florent thinks, but he's struggled to get a game for the Swans seniors.
He'd certainly not make Carlton's midfield, without significant injuries.
Yeah, but Will Hayward's a seriously good footballer. I mean, he's a smart footballer.
Well, Carlton was sniffing around him last year, and he just didn't want to leave, and he doesn't want to leave now. But
no, but he's the last interview I saw with him. He said, "Well, yeah, I don't want to leave, but football's football. If leave I must, I will."
He'd be a good pickup. And Charlie Curnow's a two-time Coleman medalist, Jack. I mean,
but he's been well below his best.
Footy is clearly the best power forward in the comp.
Yeah, yes, but he hasn't looked like that for a couple of years, really. Apart from a quarter here and a quarter there, so it's really about. I mean, a club like the Swans or if Brisbane were to get him, they'd be saying we think we can take him back to his best, and that's, and in a sense, that's part of the attraction for the player as well. If they think, well, the Cats are very good at this. Geelong are very good at this. It's promising players.
Well, they've got no room. They've clearly got no room in their salary cap, Jack, and they don't want to trade players. So the offer they made to Carlton for Charlie Curnow was rubbish. Yeah. And very quickly rejected. I did notice the graffiti artists around Princes Park were out and about, Jack. They've the latest message on the walls around the ground are saying issued Charlie Curnow with some fairly firm instructions.
Okay.
Yes, I don't know that they speak for the membership. I'll be very sorry to see him go, but if we can pick up a couple of players, won't be a bad thing. I'm just not sure that we are getting the right kind of results here with free agency. I think the father and son law, well, certainly it'll be looked at by the AFL this year. Next year. Hopefully it won't change because Carlton have got Cody Walker in the gun, Andrew Walker's son, who looks to be an absolute gun. But we'll see. In the meantime, Jack, the AFLW, I just want to set this out. Of course, the North Melbourne Kangaroos are struggling in the men's, struggle to avoid wooden spoons. They did this year, but probably didn't have the season that they wanted. There was supposed to be some improvement there. But the women are just going bananas, Jack. They haven't lost a game, and they're running around with a percentage of 331.5.
21 games on the trot, I think it is at the moment.
So they are the hot favourites to take out the tournament there. Swans had a good win over Carlton over the weekend.
Have you seen them play? It's like watching.
They're very good.
It's like watching the first 18 play the under 15.
I would say it's like watching the senior side play the under 19s. Marnus Labuschagne, Jack, has been in a poultice of runs. I think
three trots out of four goes or something. Is it 3 times?
Yeah, so some good runs there. The other one to look at is the Tasmanian opener. Who's been in runs, perhaps not quite as many as Marnus. In terms of where we are, so Marnus, you would say, is in runs, and I think he'll be in pretty good shape. The problem we've got is, of course, is the captain. The captain Cummins will probably not play in Perth. I mean, he's talking up his contribution to the series, but he said of his, it's his call for the game in Perth, but he is saying it is less likely that he will play than he will. So that creates.
It can't be his call. We have selectors still, but I don't think he'll play in Perth. Whether he'll play at all, I don't know.
If the captain's fit, he'll play, and he'll determine whether he's fit. I think that's what he was saying. So it's likely that he'll miss Perth, and that means, I suppose, Scott Boland comes in as the bowler. We lose a little bit with the bat that way, and the way things are going, it looks like Kawaja is penciled in. It looks like Marnus will open with him, and Smith will bat 3. Green at 4, Head 5, and the Tasmanian all-rounder at 6, with Carey and the bowlers to follow. That's what it looks like at this stage. We'll see. Constas is not without a chance. As I say, the WA opener, whose name is escaping me at the moment, former South Australian player. He's making a few runs, but I think they're less. I think they're going to go with, I think they're going to go with some tried and true players, I think. Certainly in the first test.
There was some advice from Davey Warner this week. He said he thinks Australia will win because we'll be playing for the Ashes rather than for the moral victory, which I rather like.
Yeah, good.
But he also said, just some advice for the team. He said, don't be stirring up Ben Stokes. It's like poking the bear.
Yeah.
And he said, I shared a dressing room with him when he was a young fella, and he quite likes him and all that kind of stuff. I read that and I thought, well, that's actually pretty good advice coming from Dave Warner.
There are some players they should come out to the crease in silence.
Yeah. But I've got to tell you, if I were asked, do you think Dave Warner could keep his mouth shut for 5 days while he was out there with Ben Stokes? I'd be saying, nah. Well, he might get to lunch on the first day, right?
Well, the great stories in Australia in the West Indies, and they'd say to one another, this is when Steve Waugh was captain, don't sledge Brian Lara. For God's sake, whatever you do, don't sledge Brian Lara. But Brian was pretty good on the sledge himself, and he'd drag a few in, and they'd have a go at him, and then 200 runs later, he'd get out or win a test match off his own bat. There are some guys you just don't say a word to. I think part of the problem, if we look at the English side, very briefly, Jack, is that it's loaded up with a lot of 140-plus bowlers. Now, you think that's a good thing, right? You take them to Perth, though. What generally happens with away touring sides in Perth is they bowl too short. But more so, the problem is going to be who's going to bowl their say that's the 50 to 80 overs. If you're just going to come in steaming quick all the time, I just don't see how that's going to work. And they don't really have they don't have a spinner at all. The one they've got's got a first class average of 40 odd. So there are weaknesses there. I notice there's been a lot of taunting and so forth go on. In the meantime, Australia are headed off to play a series of ODIs and T20s in India. That series starts very soon. All right, just taking us out, Jack. The Everest, what happened there? They had to suspend betting?
They did. The Hong Kong sprinter, Kai Rising, is
very short favourite.
Very short favourite, $1.80 or something like that. Even shorter at one stage, I think. And he trialled last week, and he looked a bit big in condition after the interrupted preparation because of the quarantine, etc. And there were all sorts of stories flying around, including that he was not going to run, all that kind of stuff. But he had a gallop yesterday and looks pretty good. And David Hayes thinks he's fine. David Hayes trains him. And
he's tubbed up a bit, Jack, on the flight.
Yeah. There was this
too much of the in-flight, too much of the in-flight food, mate.
Well, if he was Kai Rising, he'd be in 1A, I can tell you. And he's really good. There was a sort of series of interviews one of David's sons was doing on the Melbourne television, and saying, if you had to have a racehorse that was like you, who would it be? And he asked his father, and David said, well, at the moment, I'd say Kaying Rising because he's a little bit big in condition, right? He's a little bit tubby, but he looked pretty good the other day. Looked back to his normal self. So
Caulfield Cup this week, Jack. Got a tip?
The Everest and the Caulfield Cup. My advisors have been telling me half yours is, in fact, they've all taken Kaying Rising into half yours in the Caulfield Cup.
Yeah, I like half yours. And as I mentioned in previous episode, one of the owners, I think he's got about 10% of it, is Paul Farley. And Paul Farley's a mate of mine. He's had a difficult life. He was abused by priests and gave significant evidence in the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. Paul Farley, known to his mates as Charlie Farley, he's got a piece of it. And if there is a bit of justice around, I'd love to see him salute at the Ledger. I think he's in the top line of betting to win the Melbourne Cup as well.
Yeah.
All right. That takes us out. Jack, thank you for your time today and your thoughts. Listeners, we just want to remind you to drop us a line if you want us to raise some questions, make some comments, whatever you like. Drop us a line. You know how to get hold of us by now. And that takes us out of episode 130. And we'll see you next week. See you, folks. Bye.